I've been a trucker for nearly 15 years now, and let me tell you, I've seen my fair share of strange things on the road. But nothing comes close to what happened to me one night in 2017. It was the kind of experience that sticks with you, no matter how much time passes. To this day, I can't drive through a desert at night without feeling a chill creep up my spine. It all started on an overnight haul through the Mojave Desert. I was heading to Arizona, delivering appliances, or at least, I think it was appliances. Honestly, the cargo is the last thing I remember about that night. What I do remember is the pitch-black darkness that surrounded me in every direction. My truck's headlights were dim, so dim that I had been putting off fixing them for weeks. Normally, it wasn't a big deal, but out there in the middle of nowhere, it felt like I was driving blind. I debated pulling over and waiting for sunrise. But time was money, and I desperately needed both. So, I kept driving, convincing myself it'd be fine since the road was mostly a straight line. That decision would haunt me for years. About an hour before sunrise, something caught my eye in the distance. At first, it was just a faint shape on the road ahead. My heart skipped a beat as my mind raced through possibilities: an animal, a stalled car. Whatever it was approaching fast. Worried about hitting it, I slammed on the brakes. When my truck screeched to a stop, I realized what was in front of me, a car with its hazard lights blinking. But here's the weird part, it wasn't just on the road, it was parked dead center on the double yellow line. Stranger still, the passenger door was wide open. I stopped maybe a foot away from hitting it. My first thought: someone must need help, a jump start, or maybe they ran out of gas. But as I reversed my semi and pulled off to the side of the road, unease started creeping in. The whole scene felt off. I stepped out of my truck into the still desert night. It was eerily quiet, no wind, no distant sounds of wildlife, just the faint click-click-click of the car's hazard lights cutting through the silence. As I approached the car, my gut told me something wasn't right. It was a red Ford Fusion, new-looking and well-kept, but completely empty. No one in the driver's seat. No one in the back seat. No sign of life anywhere around it. My unease turned into full-blown paranoia as I scanned my surroundings. The darkness beyond my truck's headlights felt suffocating. I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead of me in any direction. Every shadow looked like it could be hiding someone, or something. Against my better judgment, I decided to investigate further. The keys were still in the ignition, though the engine was off. That struck me as odd. Why would someone leave their car like this? And where were they? I moved toward the trunk next, figuring if there were answers anywhere, they'd be there. But when I tried to open it, it wouldn't budge, it was locked tight. Frustrated but determined, I grabbed the keys from the ignition and unlocked it. Even then, it wouldn't open. That's when I noticed a rope tied around it from inside the car, keeping it shut tight. My curiosity got the better of me. I opened one of the back doors and reached through to untie it from inside. As soon as I managed to get it open, my stomach dropped. Inside were 3 large black garbage bags and a shovel. A small one, not exactly what you'd use for digging serious holes, but enough to make your imagination run wild about what someone might be burying out here in the middle of nowhere. I leaned closer to inspect one of the bags when suddenly, a deafening bang shattered the silence. A gunshot. The sound jolted me so hard that I slammed my head against the roof of the car in sheer panic. My heart felt like it might burst out of my chest as adrenaline took over. I didn't even think, I just acted. I threw the keys onto the front seat and bolted back toward my truck as fast as I could manage. As I scrambled into my cab and fired up the engine, another sound cut through the night, a voice. "Hui," someone shouted, a gruff voice that sent shivers down my spine. I turned to look and saw him, a short, husky man with red hair standing by the trunk of the car. He wore overalls and knee-high boots and held 2 things, an old hunting rifle in one hand and a small shovel in the other. We locked eyes for what felt like an eternity but couldn't have been more than a few seconds. He didn't look crazy or deranged, just worried. Like he wanted to explain himself or plead with me not to leave. But there was no way I was sticking around to find out what he wanted. As soon as my truck started moving again, he dropped his shovel and began waving his hands frantically in my direction, yelling, "Wait," over and over again. No chance. I floored it down that desolate highway without looking back, at least not until he started chasing after me on foot before sprinting back toward his car. For a moment, I thought I'd escaped him, but then headlights appeared behind me in my rearview mirror and they were gaining fast. The red Ford Fusion came speeding up behind me like something out of a nightmare. The driver honked his horn repeatedly while tailgating me so close that any sudden stop would have caused a collision. Terrified doesn't even begin to describe how I felt at that moment. I called 911 while trying to keep control of my semi-truck on that dark desert road. For 15 agonizing minutes, he stayed right on my tail before finally pulling ahead and slamming on his brakes directly in front of me, forcing me to slow down or risk crashing into him. Just when things seemed like they couldn't get worse, flashing police lights appeared up ahead in the distance. The Ford swerved off-road into the desert and disappeared into darkness before officers could intercept him. When they finally reached me moments later, all they did was take my statement before sending me on my way, not exactly reassuring after everything that had just happened. To this day, I have no idea who that man was or what he was doing out there, or why he chased after me so desperately once I discovered his car's trunk contents. Some say he might have been burying something sinister, others think he could have been hiding evidence or even dismembered remains. But honestly, for my own sanity, I tell myself he was just dealing with something less horrifying, like burying an animal or disposing of trash improperly. Whatever happened that night changed how I feel about driving through deserts forever, and every time I pass through one now I can't help but glance over my shoulder into those endless shadows lurking beyond my headlights, because you never really know what, or who, might be out there. Even after all these years, I still replay that night in my head. What if I hadn't stopped? What if I had stayed longer? What if the police had actually caught him? There are so many unanswered questions, and the not knowing is what gets to me the most.